continues to record instances of gender-based violence. Hardly a day goes by without reading or hearing about gender-based violence. Women have been known to be the major victims of gender-based violence. Unfortunately, recent statistics have indicated that women are also perpetuators of gender-based violence. It has become common to hear of women grievously harming their husband and, in the worst-case scenario, murdering them. And one wonders if this is a reaction to years of abuse or lack of information on the part of women as to where to get help when they are faced with cases of gender-based violence. In studio today, I have the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women to help us discuss gender-based violence in detail. In case you're just joining us, this is the Women's Rights TV program, and the topic under discussion is gender-based violence. I am your host, Prudence Chota, and this program has been made possible with the support from the Embassy of Sweden. And on the panelist, I am joined by Mrs. Wheeler Musukwa Mulenga, a legal advisor from the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women. Mrs. Mulenga, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Good morning, viewers.
Okay, thank you so much. And we are also joined by Mrs. Chileshenglovu, who is a counselor and is also coming from the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women. Madam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on the program.
And for our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. This is Camnet TV. Thank you for trusting us. And the topic of discussion, as I said earlier, is gender-based violence. So just in case you're joining us, this is a Women's Rights TV program, and we are discussing gender-based violence. I guess you've been seeing statistics that have been flying around on cases of increase in gender-based violence. And if we don't discuss these topics, you're going to realize that cases of gender-based violence are going to continue. And maybe as a listener, you are wondering, where am I supposed to report this case? How am I supposed to go about it? We've seen instances where people say they are being battered by their husband, and they just decide to keep quiet because they are afraid that if they report the matter, they might lose their sources of income. But there is a way in which you can be helped, and we are here to discuss these matters. So just to get into discussion, Mrs. Ndlovu, can you please just tell us something about the National Legal Clinic for Women?
Okay. So the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women is a project of the Law Association of Zambia that was established in 1990 to help women and children who are vulnerable and cannot afford legal services access affordable legal services. So we have 3 offices in Ndola, Lusaka and Livingston, and we provide litigation services, which is legal services for women and children who find themselves needing legal services. We provide lawyers. We also provide counseling in all 3 offices. We do programs like this one to inform and educate the public on topics that are of interest to them. And we publish publications like posters, booklets, brochures on topics of interest to the communities.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that elaborative details on the National Legal Aid Clinic. In case you're just joining us, this is a Women's Rights TV program, and the topic of discussion is gender-based violence, also known as GBV. You might know it by its abbreviation as GBV, but we are discussing gender-based violence, and I am joined by the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women. This is also a program that will allow you to just call in and ask questions that you have concerning gender-based violence. We have the Legal Aid Clinic. It's a legal institution that can represent you in case you are faced with challenges that have to do with gender-based violence. So just to discuss what GBV, to explain rather what GBV is, Mrs. Mulenga, what is gender-based violence?
Thank you so much. Firstly, I'll start by defining what gender means. So gender basically means being male or female. So when you talk about gender-based violence, you're talking about any physical, mental, social, or economic abuse against a person because of their gender. This could also be any harm that comes to a person, either mentally, psychologically, or sexually as a result of that abuse. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, what laws in Zambia protect victims of gender-based violence, and how do these protect the victims? Mrs. Mlenga, you can take it up.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have the Penal Code. So this is one of the laws that stipulates what offense of gender-based violence amounts to a crime. For example, one of the types of gender-based violence is physical abuse. So this physical abuse basically means beating someone, assaulting someone, or causing any harm physically on a person. So for example, if you assault someone, that's an offense. It's an act of gender-based violence, but it's also an offense under the Penal Code. So the Penal Code comes in to also say what form of punishment will go to a person who commits a crime of gender-based violence. We also have the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act. So this is an act which was created mainly to cater for victims of gender-based violence. It was created in 2011. So this act affords protection to victims of gender-based violence. They can go to court or they can go to police and report cases of gender-based violence.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much for explaining that. In case you're just joining us, this is a program where we are here to discuss gender-based violence. We've seen cases of GBV increase in the country, and we need to discuss these matters in order to help someone who might be a victim of gender-based violence. Mrs. Ndlovu, what are the different forms of gender-based violence, and what are the common forms of GBV that have been reported at your institution? Okay, so there are 5, basically, main forms of gender-based violence. These are physical abuse. Physical abuse is the most common one reported at our office. This one includes kicking, biting, hitting, slapping, and most people recognize that because it leaves marks. Then there's also verbal abuse, which is when someone calls you names, they insult you, they demean you, they talk to you in a demeaning manner. That is verbal abuse. There's also sexual abuse, which is an act of sex against someone's will. It includes rape and incest, even some touching. Someone touches you in a manner that you're not comfortable with, that is also sexual abuse. There's also mental abuse. Mental abuse is when someone does something that affects you mentally. It's very difficult to pinpoint mental abuse, so we don't get a lot of reports of it. But it's something that makes you very uncomfortable, and usually when a mental abuser is called out, they'll pass it off as a joke or accuse you of being too sensitive, and yet you're hurt by it, and so it also becomes a form of abuse. Thank you so much, Mrs. Ndlovu. So I am a married woman, and I have my husband at home, and I'm told as a woman I have to meet some of the demands by my husband. So I'm not in a mode of making love to my husband, and he forces himself on me. Is that also GBV, or is that a violation of my right? Maybe explain about that.
That's a very controversial topic, actually, because any act of sex that you're not comfortable with, especially sexual intercourse, amounts to rape. But then when you get married, you know what your obligations are, you know what your duties are, and you know what is expected of you. So if there's a good reason, maybe you're not feeling well, or something has happened and you're not able to carry out those duties, or it's that time of the month, then it's an offense. But you just can't wake up and decide that, no, this is not going to happen today, without giving a reason, because now you're abusing the other person by denying them their conjugal rights as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. We have seen an advancement in technology, and we've seen a lot of people are now using social media platforms to express themselves and communicate information and stuff like that. So is there any form of violence that takes place in the cyberspace now with the advancement of this technology and the use of social media? Mrs. Ndlovu, you can take that as well.
Mrs. Mangle.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that up. Okay, so indeed, as you have stated, social media has become one of the tools that we use as a country and as a community to communicate on different areas of life, and also get information on what's happening in the country and around the world. Unfortunately, some people have taken advantage of social media, and you find that they're abusing it. So a lot of cases of gender-based violence have actually been reported from sites like Facebook or WhatsApp. So one of the forms of gender-based violence that is happening is cyberbullying. Especially women and children are targets of this cyberbullying. So you find a situation where someone on a good day, they're feeling good about themselves, they post a picture on Facebook, then you see all sorts of comments targeted against them. All sorts of verbal abuse. They start targeting how they appear on their face, how their body appears, and all sorts of comments. So that's actually a form of gender-based violence. And I must mention that actually a law has been created, I think it was enacted in 2021, it's Act number 2 of 2021, the Cyber Security and Cyber Crimes Act. So the Act provides that if a person uses social media to harass someone, or to cause someone to go through emotional distress, psychological distress. Some people, unfortunately, even go to the extent of committing suicide as a result of cyberbullying. So that act says that if at all you find yourself abusing someone on these platforms, you can be imprisoned to a term of 5 years. And also another form is where you find that maybe someone takes a picture of themselves or a video of themselves in a compromising situation. Maybe they share it with someone they trust or someone they love, and it finds itself on Facebook, on WhatsApp, it's circulating. So that's also another form of gender-based violence. Maybe on that point, we'll also take time to maybe encourage our young women and girls, because these are victims mostly of these circulating videos. We're not saying men do not go through that, but we're saying the majority of victims are women and girls. So it's maybe a form of encouragement that we should not take such pictures of ourselves or videos and circulate them. Even if we're circulating to someone that we trust or love, it's the same people who at the end of the day post those things. So it's just a form of warning and encouragement to young women and young girls to desist from doing that. Because not only will the person who's posting those things be imprisoned, but you also stand a chance of being arrested for taking such pictures and circulating them. Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Mlenga, thank you so much. Maybe you're wondering, you only thought GBV is when you have been battered or beaten or butchered by your husband, but even if you are verbally abused on social media, you post a picture and people begin to insult you on how you look. I have come to learn, according to Mrs. Mlenga, that that is a form of gender-based violence, and you are free to report such matters so that you can get help. Most of the young ones now have ended up committing suicide because they were hit by a post or a comment that was made by someone, but that should not be the case. That's why these institutions are here to help us live life in the way that we are supposed to. In case you're just joining us, this is Women's Rights TV program, and the topic of discussion is gender-based violence, and we are joined by the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, and this is a phone-in program. If you have questions that you would like to ask about gender-based violence, just call the number that are dialing on the screen, and let's get to hear your experience or the questions that you have to ask. Mrs. Nglovu, what are some of the underlying cause of gender-based violence in the country?
Okay, so from our experience at the clinic, after talking to people, what we have come to discover is most of these underlying, the most common one actually, is alcohol and drug abuse. Most of, especially the physical and the verbal abuse, happens when one of the parties is drunk or has abused alcohol, is under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Now, that's a major reason for gender-based violence. You can't blame the alcohol, but you blame the person who has taken the alcohol. Then we also have people who have just been brought up in homes where there was a lot of violence, so that's what they know. They equate being in marriage, being in love, being in a relationship with violence. So they even sometimes say that if I don't beat her, then I don't care about her. I only beat people who I love, who I care about. And then in some instances, it's just a failure to resolve issues. People just haven't learned the art of having a difference and resolving it in a mature and in an amicable manner. They always resort to insulting, they'll resort to the silent treatment, they'll resort to withdrawing funds in the home, which then amounts to economic abuse. and because they just don't know how to behave in such a manner, and because they have that hold over you, where they're the ones who are earning, so they withhold the money until you do whatever it is that they want. So those are some of them. And also we have some very harmful traditional practices which amount to gender-based violence. These are things like virginity testing and dukupiana when someone dies. All those amount to gender-based violence as well.
Okay. We've for many years lived to believe that only women are victims of gender-based violence, but we've seen instances where women have equally become the perpetrators of gender-based violence. Mrs. Ndlovu, why do you believe that women are increasingly becoming perpetrators of GBV?
Okay, a study hasn't really been carried out on why this is so, but in just talking to the women perpetrators, what we've come to realize is that a lot of women were victims themselves initially. They either were abused by the person that they ended up harming, or they grew up in an abusive home. So it's because of taking in so much and not lashing out. When they do finally lash out, it's too much, and they end up hurting someone and killing in some instances.
Okay. When a woman is being prepared to get in a home, previously, I don't know if, maybe for lack of a better word to use, we saw situations where a woman was told, your husband has to discipline you if he loves you. And sometimes it will go as far as him beating you. And you find that women are being abused in homes, and they've just kept quiet because they were taught that life is like that, because they were taught that a man can beat you if he loves you, as a way of disciplining you. So let me throw this back to you, Mrs. Ndlovu. Is gender-based violence prevalent in some cultures, and what are some of the cultural practices that amount to gender-based violence?
Yes, like you said, in some cultures it is. It's more prevalent in some cultures than in other cultures. In some religions more than in other religions, because of the way that women have been brought up, women and children, women and girls have been brought up, women and children have been told how to behave in such a way. So even when it's happening, you're not even sure that you're being abused, because you were told that you need to take it as a wife, as a woman, as a mother. That is the way it's supposed to be. So in some cultures, yes, and even some of our beliefs as Africans, as Zambians, most of those amount to, some of those amount to gender-based violence.
Okay, but how can we move away from this culture of where women are taught, if a man loves you, he should beat you as a way of disciplining you? Maybe just give a more elaborative way.
Okay, so what has happened now is we're here on TV, people are watching us, so now they know what, those who didn't know, have an idea of what gender-based violence is. Trainings are going on around the country, training traditional leaders, training Banachimbusa and Bashibukombe, and the syllabus has changed. Those who are getting married now are really not going through the things that were going on in the times that, for example, the time we were getting married, I was getting married 20 plus years ago. Now the syllabus has changed. Now we know what gender-based violence is. Now people are aware that you can't expect someone to be abused emotionally, verbally, physically, and take it all in the name of marriage.
What of for those who are in rural areas? How are you helping them table the matter, or the cases to do with GBV, because most of them have been victims, and in some rural areas and remote areas, you will find that these cultures are still living?
Yes, but we do go there. We go as far as Chama. We go as far as the furthest point that you can think of. We've been there and we've talked to the traditional leaders, we've talked to church leaders, we've talked to the children themselves, and we've talked to so many people on these topics. So really, I think everybody by now in this country has heard about gender-based violence.
Okay. Thank you so much. In case you're just joining us, this is Women's Rights TV program, and the topic we are discussing is gender-based violence, and have been joined by the National Legal Aid Council for Women, and we are just discussing gender-based violence, and the program has been made possible with the support from the Embassy of Sweden. Okay, Mrs. Mlenga, It hasn't actually hit me. It just slapped me. We've heard women say or make such remarks to say, no, it didn't beat me or it didn't hit me. It was just a slap. Does this mean that it was not gender-based violence? How many times does one have to be beaten or experience acts of gender-based violence of any form for it to constitute an offense?
Okay, so I'll start with a slap. So a slap is sufficient to amount to an act of gender-based violence. We've heard of women who have lost their sight, their sense of hearing, merely by being slapped. Some have even died. Maybe she slapped, in the process she falls and dies. So a slap is very much a form of gender-based violence. And one act is sufficient to constitute an act of gender-based violence. So if I'm beaten once, I can still go to the police. They won't turn me away. They won't say, no, wakumenya kuchabeka mozi, bwelako after wakumenya ko kavidi. No. A single act is enough to constitute an offense of gender-based violence.
Yes. Thank you so much. In case you are just watching and you've had these experiences, just call the number that is dialing on the screen, and you can make your contributions, your concerns, you can ask questions. We have the women's right, we have the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, and we are discussing gender-based violence. And you've heard Mrs. Mulenga just say, it doesn't matter how many times you've been slapped, it starts with once, and then it will repeat, and then the situation gets worse. So before you lose your sense of hearing and everything, get to ask my panelists today to just elaborate more on where you can find their services and how they can help you. You don't have to be silent when you are being abused. Let's say no to gender-based violence, and we are going to build a better Zambia together. Mrs. Inglovo, who are the major victims of gender-based violence in Zambia?
Okay, so the major victims of gender-based violence in Zambia are women and girls. Reports indicate that more women report incidences of gender-based violence than men do. And also the girls also report more than the boys do. I think women are more of the victim, and because they seem to be weaker, or men, I suppose, assume that they are weaker physically, mentally, economically, socially. They think that women are weaker, so they're taken advantage of.
Okay, thank you so much. At the beginning of the program, I asked Mrs. Mulenga what are some of the laws that protect victims of gender-based violence, and we did see Madam Mulenga explain about what the Constitution says about that matter. In those ends, Mrs. Inglovo again, who can file a complaint of gender-based violence, and where can the complaint be filed?
Okay, so the best place to file a report of gender-based violence before you go anywhere is the police. Either the police itself, proper police station, or even the victim support unit of the Zambia police. So anybody who has information on gender-based violence can file a report. It can be a neighbor, it can be a teacher, it can be a nurse or a doctor, anybody interested, a family member, or anybody else can go and report. Once a report is made to the police won't, when they're doing the investigations, won't go and tell the people they're investigating that, oh, your neighbor came to report you that you beat your wife. They'll carry out the investigations, and the person who reported is protected as a whistleblower, so they won't be taken advantage of by the person who's perpetrating, because they won't know who reported them.
Okay, that is interesting. Have you experienced a situation where you reported the matter to the police? We would like to find out how was the situation handled. So you can call the numbers that are scrolling on the screen and just tell us what has been your experience. This is a phone-in program, and we are discussing gender-based violence, and have been joined by the National Legal Aid Council, the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, pardon me, and this takes me to Mrs. Mulenga. What should the police do after receiving a complaint of gender-based violence?
Thank you so much. Okay, so when the police receive a complaint of gender-based violence, they should promptly assist the victim. So the first assistance that the police should do is offer protection to the victim and to the person who has reported on behalf of the victim in a case where the victim is not able to report. In a case where the nature of the violence reported is sexual abuse or physical abuse, maybe there are serious injuries that the victim has suffered, the police should help the victim with medical assistance. So this is maybe referring the victim to a hospital, a government hospital, where they're going to get the necessary medical attention. Or if the victim is in a state where they can't take themselves to the hospital, the police should be in a position to take the victim to the hospital so that all the medical tests are conducted on the victim, and the victim is given the medical attention that is needed. So apart from that, the police should also get a detailed statement from the victim. This is so in the event that the matter goes to court, at least all the necessary information at that particular time should be on record. And if the victim is a child, the police should interview the child in the presence of their parent. If the parent is the one who has committed the offense of gender-based violence against the child, then the police should get a guardian to that child. In the event that they're not able to, they can also bring on board the social welfare department. So the police should also find alternative shelter for the victim. In cases where the victim is coming from a home setup and that's where the violence is taking place, this could be maybe the wife has run away from home because the husband is abusive, or the child has run away from home because of abuse, either physical or sexual. So there are other organizations that work hand in hand with the police when it comes to securing shelter for the victims. So there's YWCA, they offer shelters to victims of gender-based violence. Also, the Department of Gender also offers shelters to victims of gender-based violence. So this is basically what the police should do. And in the event where the victim wants to get maybe their properties from the house, let's say a home setup, the wife has left home because the husband is abusive, and she's proceeded to report to the police. So while the investigations are ongoing and the wife maybe needs to get the insertions from the house, the police can escort her and ensure that she gets her things. And the police should also help the victim preserve evidence so that at least the conviction is secured should the matter go to court.
Mrs. Mlenga, thank you so much for explaining that to our viewer out there. But I would like to find out, we've seen instances where you report a case at the police and the police will tell you, go and report it at the clinic, then you come back here. And you find that most of the time people have gone and they've ended up not coming back because when they went to the police, it was really hurting. But maybe as they go along the way, they come and they just decide to put the situation back. But I heard you explain to say police officers sometimes can also accompany the victim to the clinic. Where are we getting it wrong? Do we have instances where police officers in Zambia do accompany victims? Because we've seen people have reported cases of just being told, go and report at the clinic, then afterwards you come back.
Okay, like I said earlier on, sometimes there are cases where the victim may not be in a position either physically or mentally to go and go to the clinic. So in that case, the police can assist the victim. Let's say someone who's been badly beaten, they're unconscious, they can't take themselves to the hospital. In that case, the police can come in and take the victim to the hospital. But in a situation where the victim is in a position to take themselves to the hospital through the help of family members, well-wishers or neighbors, in that case, then they can go there.
Okay, thank you so much. Gender-based violence has claimed the life of many people, and keeping quiet is not a solution to protecting someone you love. It's not a solution to ending gender-based violence. We are joined by the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, and we are discussing gender-based violence. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, find out more on where you can report the matters that have to do with which courts handle cases of gender-based violence. And if you need to learn more, just big rooms to the screen. We are going to take a short break. See you on the other side. Thank you.
Africa is rising to a new dawn of integrity and accountability. Are you tired of being swindled or buying fake or illegal properties? Would you like to sell or buy genuine property? Would you like to list your property on both local and international market. Don't waste your time. Call the professionals, the SGK Properties, on +260 762 166 018. SGK Properties. Your business assurance is our priority.
The Camnet October Conference is fast approaching. To participate in the forthcoming conference, you're required to book your seat by paying 750 kwacha per person per day. Date 1st and 2nd October 2021. Venue The Healing Word Ministries International in Ibex Hill. Guest speakers include Professor Reda, Professor Munkumba, Mr. Nkuruma Kalaluka, Dr. Musonda, Dr. Sitima, Anthony from USA, Dr. Mwale, Honorable Bob Sichinga, Elias Bondela, and your hosts, Pastors Victoria and Moses Chiluba.
You can also participate via Zoom at 300 kwacha per day.
Make your payments through mobile money for MTN 096 296 5883, for Airtel 097 975 3010. Our banking details are 913 000 182 5325, Stanbic Bank, Kablonga branch.
For those living abroad, make payments via Wild Remit. The deadline for payments will be 28 September 2021. Any late payment made after 28 September will attract a penalty fee of 200 kwacha per person.
Are you a small to medium enterprise looking to advertise your products and services within your community and across Zambia? In these economic times, we are here to help you grow your business. Advertise with us on Camnet Market. Camnet Market is offering lower rates for prime time advertising between 06 to 18 hours every day to give your business an edge under the new normal and beyond. For more details, contact us on the following numbers: 097 975 3010 or 096 296 5883, as well as 096 244 726. You can also reach us via email on info@CamnetTVAfrica.com. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Thank you so much for still staying with us. This is the Women's Rights TV program, and the topic of discussion is gender-based violence. I am joined by the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, and we are here to discuss gender-based violence and how you can access the services to help you overcome the many mental, psychological, and other effects that come out of gender-based violence. So before we went for a break, we were just discussing how the police are supposed to handle the case when GBV has been reported at a police station, and Mrs. Molenga was just explaining the procedures on how the police officers are supposed to go about handling such cases. So now I'll get back to Mrs. Mlenga again. So Mrs. Mlenga, how do the courts protect victims of gender-based violence? Okay, before you answer that question, sorry, we would like to find out which courts have the power to handle cases of gender-based violence.
Okay, only the subordinate court has the power to handle cases of gender-based violence. So others call it the magistrate court. So this is only court according to the Gender-Based Violence Act, which has the powers to handle cases of gender-based violence. Yes.
Okay. Have you had an experience where you appeared in court for a situation or a case that has to do with gender-based violence? This is a phone-in program. You can call to ask your questions, to share your contributions, to also share some of your experiences so that we can deal with this matter together. This takes me to the question that I wanted to ask earlier, and Mrs. Mlenga, you can equally take it up. So how do the courts protect victims of GBV?
Okay, thank you. So the courts protect victims of gender-based violence by issuing a number of orders. So I'll start with the protection order. So this is an order that is given to the victim to protect her from an act of gender-based violence. So in that order, for example, it would tell the offender, the person who is committing an act of gender-based violence, to stop committing an act of gender-based violence. And also in a case where maybe there's harassment, they'll order that the offender should not go within 100 meters of where the victim is. Let's say I'm a victim of gender-based violence. The person who has committed that act of GBV against me should not come within 100 meters of where I am, otherwise they'll be in breach of that order. And also, in cases where the offender owns a gun, the court can order that the license for that person is suspended during the period of the protection order. So basically, the protection order is an order compelling the offender of GBV not to commit any acts of gender-based violence or to threaten to commit acts of gender-based violence against the victim. So another order that the court gives is what we call an occupation order. So this is an order which mainly applies where the victim and the perpetrator are sharing one house. It could be a relationship of husband and wife. It could be a relationship of daughter and father or daughter and mother, but they're sharing sharing the same house. So in cases where the gender-based violence is quite serious, where the court feels that if these two people continue living in the same house, one of them is going to die, the court will grant what we call an occupation order. So this order basically compels the person who's violent to move out of the house so that at least there's a period of reflection or the victim is protected. So this occupation order mainly is given for a period of 12 months. But if at all the victim feels that after the 12 months their life is still in danger and they can't continue living in the same house with this person, then they can go back to court and apply to extend that occupation order. So sometimes it could be that maybe the house is a rented house. Once the offender has been asked to move out of that house, they should continue paying rent for the victim because they've continued living in that house, and they should also continue maintaining the family during their absence of 12 months. And also earlier on in the program, Mrs. Ndlovu had mentioned that economic abuse is another form of gender-based violence. So this is why a person who has the financial capacity refuses to provide for the family. Let's say if I'm the breadwinner and I stop providing for the family, it's also a form of gender-based violence. So if the victim goes to court and says, my husband has stopped providing for me and he's committed acts of gender-based violence against me, the court can issue a maintenance order. So this is an order which is compelling that person who has the financial capacity to provide for the family to continue providing for the family. So this is basically how the court provides protection to victims of gender-based violence.
Okay, thank you so much. Just a week ago, we had an incident where a 3-year-old girl was being raped by her stepfather, and the act continued for quite some time until the auntie to the child actually noticed there was something wrong, took the child to the clinic, and it was realized that the child was being raped by the stepfather. And when the man was taken to the police, he was arrested. The mother to the child actually came out and said, you can't arrest my husband because I am expecting a child. I don't know where to take this child, and I need that man to provide clothing and shelter for this unborn child. So she was demanding that the man be released so that he can also look after the unborn child. In cases where that person is released, and we all know that this person was a perpetrator of gender-based violence, and they come back to live in a home with the victim of such cases. So what are some of the consequences if someone disobeys a protection or occupation order?
Okay, so the law is quite serious on GBV. So if an order is granted by the court and they've told you not to commit this act of gender-based violence, or they've told you don't be staying in this house for a period of 12 months until the court orders you to return, and you proceed to disobey that order, you'll be sent to prison for a period of 7 years. And unfortunately, in some cases where you proceed, maybe a protection order has been issued, you proceed to disobey that protection order, and you further go on to commit other acts of gender-based violence, you can also be prosecuted in court for those new acts that you've committed, and you find yourself maybe being sentenced to maybe even 7 years or more, in addition to breaching the protection order. So that's how serious the protection order is. Once it is issued by the court, it is very necessary that the person obeys that protection order, otherwise they risk being sent to jail.
Okay. Have you been butchered by a person you once thought can protect you? Have you been bullied before on social media platforms? What has been your experience? We are discussing gender-based violence, and this is a phone-in program. You can just call and ask the questions that you have concerning gender-based violence. Mrs. Zimolenga, let me throw this to you again. Does a victim of gender-based violence need to hire a lawyer?
Okay. It is not necessary, or it's not mandatory, sorry, it is not mandatory for them to hire a lawyer, but it's highly advisable that they do so, because this is something which is emotional for the victim. They're traumatized, they've gone through so much as a result of this gender-based violence, and they may not be in a position to push this case through. So it's advisable that they engage a lawyer who's going to help them through the process of these proceedings of gender-based violence. In cases where for one reason or another they can't engage a lawyer, the clerk of court of the subordinate court has been trained to help these victims of gender-based violence make applications for gender-based violence. Yes.
Okay. You did mention that it is really an offense for someone who's a perpetrator of gender-based violence disobeying a protective order. So I would like to find out, how are the court proceedings held for a protective order?
Okay. So ordinarily, court sessions for criminal offences are open to the public. So it means if you're in court, members of the public can come in and listen to these proceedings. But for gender-based violence, these are not held in open. In short, they're held in a closed room, in chambers, where only the victim...
Okay, we've got a call. We've got a call.
Hello?
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you. You are through to the program. You can go ahead with your contribution or your question.
And this is from Torres.
Pardon?
From Torres.
Okay, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask one warrior. What was she wants to help the there? There are instances of people being rushes to the hospital.
Sir, can you please repeat the question? Can you repeat the question? You're breaking. We can't get you clearly. So just repeat the question.
Let me try to call you back.
Okay, we are able to get you. You can please just go ahead with the question.
Yes, my question was, what way to advise the youth consider those with senior? This is victim. This person will just rush directly to the hospital. And yet she has been allowed by the husband. Instead of going to the hospital, try to go and get to the hospital. As soon as he reaches there, he defends the husband and says, he was just a man. And then she's attended to. So we have a voice in that. What word can you give people who have been harassed by the husband?
Yes.
Okay, all right, sir. Thank you so much for coming through. Okay, I'm sure this question might have been directed to Mrs. Mulenga.
Okay, we can add a few things.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so hospitals, I think they also have what we call one-stop centers, where there's also a presence of a police officer and medical personnel. And these medical practitioners are also trained. If they notice that they're treating a victim of gender-based violence, they also have powers to lodge a complaint with the police in relation to this incident of gender-based violence. But victims are highly encouraged to speak out on cases of gender-based violence. You might think you are protecting the perpetrator, but you're actually disadvantaging yourself and mostly the children, if at all there are any children involved. So in most cases where someone goes to the hospital without going to the police, the nurses and doctors are actually trained. When they notice that this is a case of gender-based violence, they are mandated to report to the police that they've recorded a case of gender-based violence at the hospital. Then the police can take it up from there. In some cases, even if the victim is not willing to come out and report this case, but if the court or the police is of the view that this is a very serious case of gender-based violence, and even if the victim is not willing to come out, they can still pursue that case without the victim's testimony. Yes.
Okay. Maybe Mrs. Ndlovu, he asked to say, what advice do you have for the women sometimes who shun from coming out and just expressing their dissatisfactions?
Okay, so like Mrs. Mulenga has said, first of all, anybody can report that issue, including the caller himself, if he has first-hand information that this woman is lying and she got these injuries by her husband. He will still be protected. Nobody will report him as being the one who has reported the case. But also to women out there, to the survivors, you're a survivor now because he hasn't hit you badly enough to kill you. But the more he hurts you, the more your body gets weaker, and one day it could just end up fatal, where you die. So you'll be dead, and he'll be in prison, and the children are the ones who are left now to be looked after by relatives and other people. So even if you're staying for the sake of the children, he can still look after you, he can still provide for you if you report him and you get one of the orders that Mrs. Mulenga was talking about.
Okay, thank you so much. So before our caller came through, Mrs. Mulenga, you were just elaborating on the proceedings held for a protective order. So you can continue.
Okay, so I was saying that these proceedings are held in an enclosed space. Ordinarily, any court proceedings should be in the open, where members of the public are open to hear these proceedings. But when you're dealing with GBV, they're usually held in chambers, where it's only the victim and the person who's committed the gender-based violence and their lawyers, if any. So the court usually, if at all the victim is very violent, the court would not want the victim and the offender to be in the same room. So the subordinate courts have what we call a GBV room, where there's a TV screen and a camera. If the if the offender is very violent and the victim is in fear of her life, and they feel they can't be in the same room with the offender, then the court will separate the two of them and the proceedings will be through the TV. And during those proceedings, the offender is not allowed to directly address the victim, because this is a case that has to prove, you need to prove as a victim that you've gone through gender-based violence. Maybe you testify, you explain to the court, and the offender is allowed to ask questions, but they'll ask those questions through the court. And we've seen cases where some court proceedings, maybe they're published, maybe on social media or in the paper, but when you're dealing with cases of gender-based violence, these proceedings won't be published in any newspaper or forum. So this is basically to encourage victims to come out so that they report these issues of gender-based violence. Most victims maybe will be afraid that maybe if I go to court, I'll have to face the offender, he has to confront me, or maybe my story will end up being on social media or in the newspaper. So this is just an assurance that this is in an enclosed space, so that the identity of the victim and the integrity is protected after these proceedings. So women are encouraged to come out. These proceedings are safe in nature. Yes.
Okay, maybe just adding to that, can a case of gender-based violence be settled outside the court, maybe by a police or a family meeting?
Okay. So a case of gender-based violence can be settled out of court if it's not serious in nature. By serious in nature, I mean if at all the victim did not suffer very serious injuries. So you can't have a victim who's been badly beaten, the eye has been cut, they've been hit, and they want to settle the case outside court. The court will not accept to settle that matter outside court. There have been situations where a victim who's been badly beaten will go to court when the matter comes up and say, I want to withdraw my case. So ordinarily, if a victim withdraws, that case would not go anywhere, because the court would have challenges convicting. But we've had cases where the victim will refuse to proceed with the case, but the court will still proceed to hear the matter and maybe even find the offender guilty of the offense. So cases where a gun was used, maybe to commit the act of gender-based violence or to threaten the victim, the court won't accept that such a case should be settled outside court. But cases which are not really serious in nature, the court may order that maybe the parties go through counseling, or maybe a mediator is called in to sit down the parties and see how best this issue can be resolved. But where the case is very serious, a gun was used, or a person planned the case of gender-based violence, maybe they went to buy petrol, they went to buy gas and say, maybe when this woman comes, I'm going to set a blaze. The court won't tolerate for that case to be settled outside court. And maybe I must also emphasize that there are some cases of gender-based violence where they've gone to court and the person comes that, okay, let me pay you a certain amount of money, we settle this case. So the fact that the victim has accepted the money does not mean that the case should not go through. Yes.
Thank you so much. In case you're just joining us and you're wondering what this is a Women's Rights TV program, and the topic under discussion is gender-based violence. And I have been joined by the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, and I have Mrs. Willa Musukwa Mulenga, a legal officer from the institution, as well as Mrs. Chileshe Ndlovu, a counselor from the institution. Mrs. Ndlovu, what other services are available to victims of gender-based violence?
Okay, so all victims, all survivors and victims of gender-based violence get free medical services at any public or government hospital. So when you report the matter to the police and you're given a form to take to, starting from the police, you don't pay anything for the form, and even when you go to the hospital, you don't pay anything to access the treatment. Unless the hospital doesn't have medicines, maybe they'll ask you to buy the medicines, but anything else is free of charge. And then there are also shelters available. The YWCA has shelters, as does the Ministry of Community Development and Social Welfare. They have shelters for women and survivors, and also for children who are survivors of gender-based violence. Those are the services, but mostly all services are free of charge.
Okay, thank you so much. Have you experienced gender-based violence before? Have you, what were your experiences? Do you know someone who's been violated, whose rights have been violated? There is a line that is scrolling. This is a phone-in program. You can just go to make your contributions, to ask the questions. If you have burning questions about gender-based violence, how can you go about it? I am a mother. I have 7 children, but my husband is abusive. How do I table or tackle this issue? The the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women is here to provide a solution for you. Okay, we've got a caller on the line. Good morning. Okay, we lost the caller, unfortunately. Mrs. Ndlovu, what are the harmful effects of consequences of gender-based violence?
Okay, so the most common effect of gender-based violence, the most serious one actually, is sometimes it results in death or permanent injury. Sometimes one of the survivor dies, or even then they're not a survivor, the victim dies, or sometimes because they've been a victim for such a long time, they end up killing the person who has been a perpetrator all their lives. And also sometimes you get a broken leg, you get broken limbs, you lose an eye. Those are some of the consequences. Sometimes children who grow up in such homes become future perpetrators themselves, because that's all they know. These are children who, when they are playing with their friends, are always fighting, are always insulting. They're very rough and very aggressive children because of the environment that they're coming from. And then on some, especially in cases of defilement, some children become depressed. Even some older women become depressed. They become suicidal. Those are some of the consequences of gender-based violence if help is not sought in time.
Okay. Thank you so much. And maybe what can members of the public do to reduce cases of gender-based violence? Mrs. Ndlovu.
Okay, so like we said earlier, members of the public can keep an eye out, be a neighbor's keeper, be a sister's keeper, and report all these cases, because if these cases are not reported, they have an effect even on family finances. Instead of working, one party is nursing their wounds, the other party could be in the cells, and that has an effect on the family, which has an effect on the community, which has an effect on the country. So if everybody reports even just suspicions of gender-based violence to the police, and let the police handle it, let the police carry out the investigations, then I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. Thank you so much. They say prevention is better than cure. If you see or notice that there are signs, or someone is giving you signs, your conscience is telling you this is leading to gender-based violence, or you are there, you are experiencing gender-based violence, the earlier you report the matter, the better you will be helped than sitting and just waiting to say, perhaps it will be vakachinja, it will change, or things like that. This is what has been leading to most deaths that occur due to gender-based violence. We've equally learned that cyber bullying can sometimes also be a form of violence. It doesn't really have to be physical. Have you been abused on social media? What has been your experience? You can just phone in, and if you have questions or contributions that you would like to make. I have been joined by the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, and we are discussing gender-based violence. And Mrs. Mulenga, just moving on, where can victims of gender-based violence go to seek legal services?
Okay, so the first place is the police station. So if you're a victim of gender-based violence, you can go to the nearest police station and report this case of gender-based violence, and you'll be assisted.
Oh.
Yes, so if you're a victim of gender-based violence, you can go to your nearest police station and report this case of gender-based violence, and you'll be assisted. We also have our institution, the Legal Aid Clinic for Women. We help victims of gender-based violence, mainly women and children. We help by obtaining the orders that I had mentioned, the occupation orders, the protection orders, and the maintenance orders, just to protect them against cases of gender-based violence. There's also the YWCA. They also assist victims of gender-based violence. And the subordinate court, like I mentioned, is the only court which is mandated to hear issues of gender-based violence. The clerk of court at the subordinate court can assist a victim of gender-based violence to obtain a protection order.
Okay. Thank you so much. There you have it. So I'm going to get final remarks from both Mrs. Mulenga and Mrs. Ndlovu. Maybe the public there is wondering. So just what are your final remarks? I'll start with you, Mrs. Ndlovu.
Okay, so in closing, I'd just like to say that there's help out there, and there's hope for survivors, for victims of gender-based violence. There's hope for if you report the matter, as long as you're quiet, as long as you keep it in the home, as long as you keep it in the family, nobody will know. The action can only be taken if you speak out about it. If it's kept a secret, because we're a very secretive society, if it's kept a secret, then nobody will know and nobody will be able to help you.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Mulenga.
Okay, so my advice is to mainly women. They should speak up on cases of gender-based violence. The police is there to protect you, and we have institutions, the Legal Aid Clinic for Women, who are also there for you to protect you in cases of gender-based violence. It has made sad reading, and we've heard reports of a woman who was recently killed and put in a suitcase. So those are very sad instances of gender-based violence. So let us speak out and report cases of gender-based violence at the police.
Thank you so much. Maybe you can kindly provide your contact details and where your offices are found, so that those who are watching and would like to contact you can know where to go.
Okay, so we're found in Villa Elizabetha in Lusaka, Musondangosa Road, behind Cavendish University. We're also found in Livingston, number 74 Limulunga Road, area 714. We're also found in Indola, number 9 Mapanza Road. Our phone number is 0975 966 503 or 0211 220595, and we're also on Facebook as the National Legal Aid Clinic for Women, so you can like our Facebook page and send us a message and we'll get in touch with you.
Thank you so much. You don't have to die by keeping quiet if you see any form of gender-based violence. This was a Women's Rights TV program, and the topic under discussion was gender-based violence. To everyone who joined us, thank you so much. This is Prudence Tota. A pleasant good morning.